So 6 months ago, BritMonkey made a video on antinatalism called Being Alive is Good, actually. I'm a bit late to the party, but I had quite a few people asking me to react to this specific video, so I thought it was worth doing even 6 months down the line. I don't think there's really anything further ado, so let's just get into the video.
Oh, don't blame me! I didn't ask to be born!
In 2023, the world's population is set to hit 8 billion people. All 8 billion of us have lives and emotions and thoughts and memories as complex as your own. Think about how many people have the best and worst days of their life every day. But this pales in comparison to the number of people who have ever lived. Estimates range from 100 billion to 125 billion throughout all of human history, since the days of cavemen banging on rocks. But not one of these people, from mighty kings, emperors and millionaires to lowly peasants, slaves and farmers, ever asked to exist. They were cosmically press-ganged into it by their parents, for better or for worse. For a small but not insignificant group of academics.
So one of my first impressions straight off the bat is that maybe this guy hasn't done enough research. Like, it may not impact the rest of the video, maybe he has done good research, but he's got Peter Singer there, who is far from an antinatalist. I'm assuming he thinks that Peter Singer is David Benatar, because a lot of people get David Benatar and Peter Singer confused, because David Benatar doesn't have any images of himself online. For some reason, his name has been attached to Peter Singer's face, even though Peter Singer is probably the most famous living philosopher, so I don't understand how people are getting him confused with someone else. But yeah, I don't know if it bodes that well for the rest of the video if something that basic has crept in. But, you know, we'll see.
For a small but not insignificant group of academics, this is a horrendous moral crime. What right do you have to force someone into existence? For if you had not done this, they would have been spared all the inevitable pain and suffering that comes with the great journey of life. Everything from scraping their knee to painful dental work, stress created from the pressure of school, spending 8 hours a day in the office, paying taxes, broken bones, broken hearts, poverty, muggings, being too hot, being too cold, wearing itchy socks, eating a bad meal, all before the inevitable stroke or cancer diagnosis that ends your pathetic, short, worthless existence. None of these things would have ever happened if this person had never been born. One common argument against this is that you would also be depriving them of all of the good things in life. But for these so-called anti-natalists, the bad always outweighs the good.
Okay, so one thing I really want to quickly clear up here is that anti-natalists are not necessarily saying that the bad outweighs the good. That can be the case, and it is the case for many people, and it's probably the case for like 99% of animals, but that's not really the core of the argument. It's part of the argument. It's something that increases the magnitude of the harm done, but it's not the thing that labels existence as a harm in the first place. Now, I'm not going to go into super specifics on this because I think he's actually going to start explaining this given he's brought up David Benatar's asymmetry. So let's just see what he says.
And if you had never been born, you wouldn't know what you were missing, so it wouldn't bother you at all. While God said, "Go forth and multiply," don't expect religious arguments to save you either. Bad people get sent to eternal torture in hell. But you know who doesn't go to hell? People who don't exist. Yeah, they would be missing out on a chance to go to heaven too, but again, they wouldn't know what they are missing.
So maybe this is nitpicky, but this bit of a wording issue I have is when people say this person wouldn't know what they're missing, I think it kind of misses the mark. And to be honest, maybe even I've phrased it in that way before and then I've missed the mark. Someone not knowing what they're missing, it doesn't really drive home the point that there just simply isn't anyone to exist to even want that. Because someone can exist now and something really amazing happen somewhere else and them not realize it's happened and they don't even know they're missing it. But actually, it would have been a good thing if they'd experienced it, right? But if someone literally doesn't exist on any level and has no interest in these supposed good things, it wouldn't even be good for them to be created and exist to then experience it. So they're completely different categories. So it's a nitpicky like language point, but I think it's important because saying that someone doesn't know what they're missing isn't really nailing down the key point that they don't even exist to want that. So it's of no significance at all with respect to that individual who doesn't exist.
The ultimate goal of anti-natalists is to eliminate entirely the human race. Usually not through mass extinction or ritual suicide or anything, although there is a small subset of cranks such as the Finnish eco-activist Pentti Linkola, who advocated World War III on environmentalist grounds, saying, "We have to recognise the service that fascism made when it freed the earth from the weight of tens of millions of overeating Europeans by an almost ideally environment preserving means.
I mean, to be fair, I've actually never heard of this guy, Pentti, but judging from this quote, yeah, this is not what most antinatalists think. This is like a very fringe view. This is not the core of antinatalism. This is not what antinatalists want to do. What antinatalists want to do is prevent harm from ever happening in the first place, not go around and cause more of it. And to be fair to BritMonkey, he does recognize, like, this guy is just a complete outlier. And again, I don't know who this guy is. Like, I don't know anything else that he said, so no one jump on me on the comments for me being misinformed or anything. Like, this is the first time hearing that this guy, like, cut me some slack.
But this guy's just an outlier. Most antinatalists want a managed and gradual extinction of humanity through refusing to procreate until the last humans die off after a century or so nobody else is forced to exist and experience sadness and pain. Of course, this is logistically impossible.
So one thing I want to say about him saying that this is practically impossible, I don't know if it's practically possible or not. To be honest, I tend to agree with him. I think sentience is this Pandora's box that's been opened and we're never going to close it. What we can do is, knowing that future generations are going to come into existence, like new future beings are going to come into existence. And so what we can do is just keep working to try and influence the world in a way that means less individuals are going to be in those future generations and the lives they have are going to be less of a harm. Like, I think those are two things that we can do. Like, to be honest, I think this probably is a Pandora's box, but there are still things we can do.
Like I said, there are 8 billion people alive today. Convincing them all to never have children is never going to happen. Failing this, most antinatalists take up a personal vow to never procreate and make the most of their supposedly horrific lives before the sweet release of death.
Another quick thing I want to say here is he talks about antinatalists just, you know, thinking our lives are just sort of like horrible and stuff like this. Maybe he's just being a bit melodramatic and, you know, he's doing a YouTube video and stuff, so I get it, whatever. This is not necessarily the case. I don't think my life is like horrible in any way or something like that, at least at the moment anyway. And a lot of antinatalists are like that. Like, we just simply recognize that it would just be better if we were never created in the first place. It doesn't mean that you lament everything now and that you think your life is horrible. It's just that simple recognition.
Today I thought I'd give my response to the anti-natalist position. Not a debunking, just my thoughts on why I'm not completely sold on the idea. Also, the loudest opposition to this philosophy comes from weirdos like Jordan Peterson, whose only arguments are, why do you want to kill everyone on Earth? Most of them don't. And why don't you just kill yourself? Because jumping off a train is not the same as never getting on it in the first place. And if you're an anti-natalist and you're not convinced, that's fine. Just don't have kids. It's probably not your decision anyway. My viewer base is just a sausage fest. Let's start with Graham. Graham does not exist. He's chilling like an antagonist in the void of abyss. He has one human right, according to the anti-natalists, the right to consent to existence. However, as he doesn't exist, he cannot exercise that right, so it would be best to just leave him alone instead of potentially violating that right. Meanwhile, in the realm of existence and painful suffering, the anti-natalist's dream come true and everyone agrees to stop having children. Several months later, the world population has declined for the first time since World War II, and the plan is going swimmingly. Then, of course, as they do, some foolish teenagers mess around and one of them gets pregnant. Accidentally. Baby Graham is pulled out of the void against his will and turned into a baby inside his mother. His one human right has been violated. What is Graham or his mother to do? From Graham's perspective, nothing has changed yet, but on the outside, it's pandemonium in the anti-natalist world. Some people suggest she get an abortion. Don't you dare touch that comment section. This is not about politics. This is about abstract philosophy. I swear to God, I will turn off the comment section if you people can't behave. Many people suggest that she get rid of the baby to prevent Graham from ever achieving the horrors of sentience. But now the anti-natalist dilemma is flipped on its head. Because by their own logic, anti-natalists are more extreme than any hardcore Republican or fundamentalist Christian when it comes to this issue.
Okay, so one quick thing I want to say here is his characterization of antinatalists as like more extreme than Republicans. I assume he's talking there about, like, not necessarily all Republicans, but like the sort of ultra-conservative Christians that stand outside of abortion clinics and like shame people as they go in. This is not what antinatalists are doing, and antinatalists would not necessarily take the steps that Republicans and other conservative parties have done about legislating certain things, you know, surrounding abortion. Like, antinatalists would not necessarily do that. I think a level-headed antinatalist would try and change the incentive structures in society to support people in making what we see as better decisions, rather than putting hard lines in the sand that are probably going to just lead to more chaos than anything else.
Because if people who don't even exist yet have rights, surely they maintain those rights after conception.
Okay, one thing I just want to quickly say before he goes any further is he's talking about a specific case when a woman has become pregnant already. Now, obviously, what antinatalists would suggest is that we just don't get into that messy subject. Like, we just say prevent conception in the first place. Like, this seems like the easiest and cleanest ethical way forward for this question.
Graham's mother still cannot ask Graham if he wants to exist, but by getting rid of him, instead of forcing a yes choice on him, she is forcing a no choice on him. Graham cannot consent to having his life cut short any more than he can consent to having his life extended. And unlike an abstract concept of a future person who might exist, here is something that does exist.
Okay, so one thing I quickly want to say here is that BritMonkey really hasn't been clear with what he's talking about. So he's talking about a fetus inside a woman, right? But he hasn't said, is that fetus sentient at this point? The thing he's highlighting here is the unborn have the right to consent to life. Right now, this is what he's saying antinatalists think. I think it's a bit murky with talking about like rights and stuff like that. I'm not really sure what I think about that, but just generally talking about consent, I get where he's coming from. Creating someone requires a violation of consent, because creating someone requires imposing harm on them without them being able to have consented to that, and the guarantee of death as well. And yeah, he hasn't defined if the fetus he's talking about is sentient or not, so I'm not even sure what he's talking about here. So my general view on this is, if the fetus isn't sentient yet, then morally this individual doesn't exist. No right or anything like this, whatever he means by that, is being violated, because whose right is it? There's literally no one who exists. So terminating a fetus before it's sentient, I see in no way how that could harm that fetus. They don't morally exist in any relevant way, or they don't exist in any morally relevant way. Okay, but then let's say, okay, well, if the fetus becomes sentient, well, then it becomes a more complicated question, because then you've got to think about the interests of that fetus. They've got to be somewhat balanced between the fetus and the mother. You've got to ask the question, is it okay for me to terminate the fetus once they're sentient because I'm preventing them from having to go through all that harm in the future? Is that my place to even do that? There are all these complicated questions, and that's why I think antinatalists say is the best thing to do is just to avoid conception, and then if conception does happen, terminate the fetus before sentience arrives.
The way I see it, there is only two ways out of this dilemma. The first is that antinatalists admit that the only option that spares Graham his life of suffering would be to let his mother make the choice on his behalf, terminating him and sending him back to the Shadow Realm. This is kind of self-defeating because it admits that someone else can choose if you are allowed to exist, violating the first principle of this philosophy. The second way out is for antinatalists to admit people just don't have a right to choose yes to being alive. The choice vanishes at the moment of conception, which, aside from reopening some lively historical debates, doesn't actually solve the problem, as we will see. Let's fast forward a few months. Nobody in the antinatalist world can decide in time what to do with the baby. Graham is now born. He's beginning to feel all the suffering that comes with life. But for the first 5 months of his life, Graham is still not sentient or self-aware. This provides the perfect opportunity for the antinatalist society. Kill Graham. After all, he is not yet sentient. He has not yet experienced the horrors of the real world.
Okay, I'm not really sure what BritMonkey thinks sentience is. A general consensus on what sentience is just the ability to have subjective experience. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 month baby is sentient. Sentience arises at some point in the womb. Maybe he's using sentience to mean that you are aware of your own person. Being able to pass the mirror test maybe is what he's saying. I'm not sure why he thinks that is what makes an individual morally relevant. Like, they can still suffer if they don't pass something like the mirror test. So I'm not really sure where he's going with this and why he's attaching this to antinatalism. I think he's just completely gone off on the wrong path here and doesn't really understand what he's talking about. I guess this is kind of what I was talking about at the start, creeping in, where he just hasn't done enough research, doesn't really understand what antinatalists are saying.
In fact, we are perpetuating his suffering by not killing him now. For he will no doubt go on to become an adult and suffer even more pain. Save him now through a quick and painless death.
Okay, yeah, so BritMonkey has just completely gone off on one, doesn't know what he's talking about. He's completely misunderstood what antinatalists are saying. I don't think he understands what sentience means generally when people say it. He suggests killing Graham, which I think he kind of says it as if antinatalists actually like genuinely consider this as an option of like, oh, there's a newborn baby, maybe we should just bash it over the head with a rock. Like, no, like this child can suffer now, right? And they now have an interest. Like, once someone is born, they're now trapped in this complex web of interests and desires and needs. And now Graham, or anyone who's born, now has this innate desire that's been built into us by evolution to continue existing. What antinatalists say is non-existence literally has no interests in a new person being created. So what is compelling us to do this? Like, why would we think to do that when we know that once they exist, they're going to experience harm? But once someone exists, they do have interests, and those interests need to be respected.
Oh no, Mr. Morality over here doesn't want to go around giving babies the lethal injection. But why not? A year ago you were advocating getting rid of the thing. You chose option 2. Some people aren't allowed to say yes to being alive. What changed other than he has moved environment? He's still the same on the inside. Could it be that human life actually does indeed have meaning and value? At least enough value that killing baby Graham would be morally wrong. I was told life was a meaningless pit of despair that we should avoid at all costs.
Okay, again, BritMonkey displaying the fact that he just literally doesn't understand what antinatalists are saying. So when antinatalists say that life is a meaningless endeavour, it means creating it is a meaningless endeavour. Once someone exists, then they have all these needs and desires, and these needs and desires need to be respected where they can and balanced off the needs and desires of other people as well. So once Graham exists, look after Graham. Try and give Graham the best life possible. Now that he's been imposed upon, we need to try and make it so that he has the best time possible, right? Balancing his interests off of everyone else's as well. What antinatalists are saying is it's completely meaningless to create Graham in the first place. But now he's created, let's make him have the best time possible.
Which isn't true, by the way.
Okay, one thing I want to say, and again, this is maybe a bit nitpicky, but just about this header that he's put up, life is not a meaningless pit of despair that we should avoid at all costs. I think what this header does, and I think a lot of people fall down this hole, it's framing antinatalism as if it's saying something about the individual who already exists life. No, it's saying something about creating a new life. One, or I guess two people creating another life. Because saying that we should avoid life at all costs is implying that people who already exist should be somehow like cowering in fear, or maybe even ending their own life because we want to avoid life. No, this is not it. The whole thing is that we should be avoiding creating new life. And that's the morally relevant thing. I mean, he literally just did a whole section on consent, which I don't think he really understood, but he at least included it. When you're making a decision on your own behalf, consent is not needed. It's tacit in the decision you're making. The whole reason we bring up consent is because it's an action being taken by one person or two people for someone else. I don't understand how people don't get this generally. Maybe I'm making a bit of a big thing out of just a header he's made, like he just probably worded it very quickly. But I just wanted to make that point because I see this framing all the time and it really annoys me that people don't get what we're saying.
Maybe it isn't logically consistent and we can trade hypotheticals all day. Fact of the matter is, life is terrible and it is better to have never existed at all. Graham's gotta die. But is this true? For most people, probably not. In fact, there are no cultures in the world today who see existence as, on the whole, a negative experience.
Okay, so the first thing he does is appeal to the fact that there are no cultures that see life as generally a bad thing. First of all, he strawmanned antinatalists, but I'm not going to go into it again. But he's basically making here an appeal to popularity fallacy, which is a textbook fallacy, just saying, well, most people think this, so therefore it must be right. I've also made a video already, which I will pop up on screen, which goes into why, even though most people say that they enjoy their lives, it's not a good reason to create a new person. So that's a separate video. I've linked it up so you can check that out.
The closest you can get is probably Buddhist culture, that says existence is a constant cycle of suffering, but it can be overcome in the search for nirvana. Even people in the crappiest places in the world still celebrate birthdays. The anti-natalist community write this off as our silly monkey brains being pre-programmed with an evolutionary desire to procreate and be optimistic. Which is a bit of a reach to suggest the vast majority of everyone who has ever lived was delusional about their own subjective experience. And only this small group of academics are seeing things clearly.
Okay, so quickly here, he's basically just dismissed the point that antinatalists are making, or what one of the points that antinatalists make, by saying that there are very few antinatalists and the vast majority of people can't be wrong. First of all, the vast majority of people have been wrong before. I think even BritMonkey would recognize that. For example, the vast majority of people used to think that slavery was completely fine, inherent part of life, no way of changing it, completely moral, and now we've had very significant shift. The second thing is that actually it seems fairly reasonable to me that the entire species, bar a few individuals, may have a certain bias in some direction, because it's completely plausible that evolution could have built that into us, and therefore it would be widespread across our species. Just as though the propensity to violence in certain circumstances is very common in our species, the propensity to get very horny in certain circumstances. We have loads of propensities that are very common amongst our species. Why is BritMonkey saying this specific one here that these people are pointing out over there? No, that can't be the case.
If anything, the human ability to disregard small inconveniences while appreciating small pleasures is a testament to how life is more pleasant than unpleasant. And yes, while people do have suffering in their lives, I doubt most people in the world would choose non-existence over being stuck in traffic or having the flu. There also doesn't seem to be much of a connection between suicide and human development, showing that most of us are happy no matter our material well-being. But most is not all. The antinatalists argue that there is no way of knowing if your child is going to have a life of suffering. It's a roll of the cosmic dice, but if you lose, it's not you who pays for it. And you know what? For some people, pain is completely inescapable, where every moment is agony. People with serious diseases, manic depressives, Labour Party supporters. In fact, one of the most influential antinatalists, Thomas Ligotti, suffers from a condition that makes him almost completely unable to feel happiness. When he says it would have been better if he had never been born, he's probably right. These people clearly need help, whether it's assisted dying or therapy or touching grass. But cases like Ligotti are few and far between, and even people who do live these objectively crappy lives still manage to find happiness and satisfaction. Paralympians, for example. Or African Americans in the Jim Crow South, who still found the time in their obviously miserable lives to write some of the best songs ever created.
Okay, so again, I'm going to link the video I made about, if most people enjoy their lives, then it's okay to create more people. I just want to point out here that BritMonkey seems to be implying that because slaves can be happy, therefore it's fine to create more people, presumably even in the circumstances where that person is going to be a slave, and knowing that there are risks of really bad things happening to them. I don't know if that's something BritMonkey wants to stand by, but yeah, it seems a bit wild to me. If I was in the situation where I was a slave, I would say it's pretty fucked to bring someone else into that, but that's just me.
And even the very depressed find reasons to live. 70% of suicide attempt survivors never attempt it again, and most are glad that their initial attempt failed. But again, people will still feel pain if they are born. Having a child is undeniably exposing someone to suffering. And not only that, you have to force them to make the most of it. That's still immoral. It's still wrong. Well, folks, I'll let you in on a little secret of these antinatalists. These premises, they are not universal, enlightened, logical truths. They are opinions. Those who subscribe to the Stoic philosophy, for example, believe that pain and pleasure are not good or bad by themselves. They are tools to obtain virtue. Wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation in accordance to the laws of nature. Pain is a tool to indicate an unhealthy body. There are some people who have physiological conditions that mean they cannot feel physical pain. While this may seem like a real-life superpower, these people end up damaging themselves in countless other ways. They put their hands in boiling hot water to pick out dropped spoons. They walk for days on fractured ankles without knowing it, and damage their eyes by not noticing if there's something stuck in it. Pain is a tool given to us by nature that must be embraced to live a full life.
So, two things here. So, the first one is, even if you're a Stoic, it doesn't mean you can just go around imposing harm on other people and then going, but Stoicism though, so you should be Stoic, so it's fine for me to impose harm on you. No, obviously not. It's not okay to go around and impose harm on people and then tell them to just nut up or shut up because Stoicism though. Second thing is, having a Stoic perspective on life can help you once you exist, once you already have the suffering there that can be useful as a tool for you to achieve some sort of goal you have. But non-existence literally doesn't have the interests in achieving the things that you want to achieve now you exist. Someone may say suffering when you go to the gym is actually good because it helps build discipline, it helps build competence, all of these things. And I would agree that is a good thing to do once you exist. It's probably going to improve your life because you have an interest in being competent, in being healthy, in being disciplined. And so the fact that suffering can be a tool once you exist, it cannot be used as a reason to create someone because they don't have the interest and desires for the things that it would be used as a tool to get. Antinatalists don't necessarily avoid all suffering that they can for themselves. The whole point of antinatalism is not to impose suffering on someone else. That's what we're concerned about. If you want to take on some suffering for yourself because you think it would help you grow, have at it, Hoss. Like, I do that myself. That's not what it's about. There, you're making your own decisions.
Not just for ourselves. We can also use our suffering to improve humanity. People jump on grenades, killing or severely disfiguring themselves to save the lives of others. Musicians practice instruments until their fingers are sore, so they can make music that thousands of or potentially millions of people can enjoy. A teacher puts in the extra hours to make sure their students are learning and best prepared for life. We put hard work into everything that makes life worth living, from music to art to freedom and friendships, sports and knowledge. These victories and values, the reason anyone bothers to do anything, are clearly worth risking pain. Why can't we extrapolate this to an entire life? We no longer need to procreate to have an extra hunter in the tribe or farm worker on the team. In the modern world, good parents have children because they're up to the challenge of raising that child in an environment that fosters these values, where the pain they experience is not the blunt force of war, poverty or sickness, but the pain of virtue. Do parents always get it right? Clearly not. We all agree that people should think really hard about if they're capable of raising a child properly. But if you don't do something just because there's risk involved, why do anything?
He mentions if you don't want to do something because there's risk involved, then why do anything? Completely missing the point of antinatalism, which is so weird because in this video he has made a point of sometimes pointing out that the whole thing antinatalists are concerned about is that people are doing things to other people rather than to themselves. If you want to take risks for yourself and you're the only one that it could backfire on, fine, do that. I do that. Everyone does that. The whole point is it's not justified to be taking this risk for someone else and forcing that on someone else.
Is it morally wrong to become a pilot? Because if everybody stopped flying, it would cut the risk of plane crashes to zero. I think it's far more amazing that despite a hostile, uncaring universe of chaos and suffering, that happiness does exist. We can almost always obtain it no matter the situation, and make good use of the little time we have. If life truly were an overall negative experience that nobody enjoyed, we would celebrate funerals and mourn birthdays. We don't.
Okay, so that's the end of the video. He signs off there with another appeal to popularity fallacy, so not going to get into that. I think this was a bit of a fail of a video. He really could have put in more effort researching and done a better quality job, but he didn't, so there we are. I was not really impressed by this. I think he just doesn't understand antinatalism, didn't come up with good objections, but let me know what you think of this video in the comments if you've seen it. Well, I guess you have now that you're at the end of this video, and let me know what you think of what I thought of it, and I will see you all in the next one.